I can like legitimately see that the path, the journey that we went on there, it really does make me uniquely qualified to come alongside folks and help them avoid problems, see problems they didn't know exist, and give me like a renewed perspective on my ability to help from outside the walls. And so as much as I didn't probably want it and I wouldn't have signed up for it, I definitely have a unique story that I think it's probably fair to say nobody else has.
Every single individual has a story to tell, and they're great stories that need to be heard.
I want every listener to know they have the ability to change the world.
Welcome to the 1720 Podcast.
What's up, Mountain Movers? Welcome back to the 1720 Podcast. This week, we have some big things to unpack, and we have an OG of the podcast coming back for a second round, Tim Rothberg. Tim, a lot has changed since, 150 plus episodes ago, where very stuffy, very serious. Today's not going to look like that.
No, not at all. Tim, welcome. Episode 005. That's how long it's been since Tim was on.
I think you find that only on iTunes. That's how far back that is.
Yeah, you got to burn it off Napster to get that one.
Tim was the first time we tried to virtually record. Remember that? We had like a Teams call and a laptop connected to the mixer, and it was awful. It was awful. Go listen to it. It's terrible. The recording is terrible.
I thought I did great. I don't know why you're down on it so much. I mean, honestly, I carried the episode.
No doubt.
I think listeners can go back and figure that out on their own.
Yeah, good luck finding it.
Yeah. I like the bit about having to download it on Napster because there's a whole segment of listeners who they don't even know. Like if you're under 25, you have no idea what that means, right?
But we'll get text about the bit
For sure.
The right age group.
Yes, they'll be like, "Oh, Napster, yeah, got that one, got that one."
Hey, I'm gonna railroad Stewie right off the start here.
Okay, great.
Straight in the ditch, Tim. Over under, how many times do you think Stewart has introduced us and said, "Hey, this is my friend Tim"?
Oh, like you and me?
Yes.
How many times have we met? Because that would be the number.
I was thinking about that before coming on air. Like 7 times we've gotten a formal introduction. Hey, have you met Tim?
Yeah.
A lot. Yeah, I've seen him a lot.
Yeah.
And he's been on the podcast.
And then I'm like, oh, right. Yeah,
I think the only time it hasn't happened was at the Texo Gala. And that's because I got there first. And so I saw you before Stewart was even there.
He did it there too.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. It is. That's why I brought it up.
It is incredible. And I don't even at home, it's a bit, because if I'm talking about Tim at home, be like, "Oh, my friend Tim," and the kids are like, "Oh, your friend Tim." Like, I don't know. This is how
and what's interesting about the whole thing about being introduced as Stewart's friend. I never introduced him as a friend.
Not once.
Not once.
There's a funny piece to this story. We'll get to it in a second. Where I had sent an email about something and said, "Hey, blah blah blah, my best friend Tim, blah 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 blah," and then I had an exchange with this guy named Jim, and then I forwarded it to Tim. Said, "Hey, look, we're making some progress on this issue," and he responded basically like, "Puke! I can't believe you said this," or something like that. Do you remember that? It was about lease space. We'll get into it in a little bit, but the idea that we're friends is disgusting to Tim. Apparently, maybe it is to most people. I don't know.
Well, you could tell on level of friendship, like by how much banter there is. So
yeah,
that says all we need to know.
I'll tell you a funny Tim story before we get into the topics.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one. So the other day, Tim and I have been friends since 99 or 2000, plus or minus. I mean, I can't remember exactly when, but we met in undergrad back at HBU, and so long time, like 20. Let's call it 25 years. Last week, I did something that offended Tim in a way that he said it was like the most angry he's ever been at me, which is great, right? 25 years, and I did it last week. He was down with the flu, like out of commission with the flu, and he texted me about how he's just been on.
Well, hold on. It wasn't just people say they get the flu and they're down. We're talking 4 straight days of shivering uncontrollably, like the for real flu.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, I got a little sniffle. No,
Yeah.
like I was praying for the comfort of the kiss of death. That's what I was hoping for.
Not that
Go ahead,
trendy
Stuart.
COVID stuff.
No, not that stuff. Like something real.
So
That's a joke. COVID's real.
so he had the flu real bad, and I forget what was it. What did I responded to via text?
Yeah, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So he writes this text message to me that he had been in a gymnasium from 7 a.m. to 11 watching his kids play basketball and volleyball. Quote, equally exhausting.
It's amazing, right?
Comparison's the thief of joy, Stewie.
Yeah. Ellen apparently like legitimately angered. So now it's a bit. I was at the gym. It's awful. Well, in any event.
Yeah, we're going to sprinkle this nonsense in throughout, but we actually do have some topics to talk about today, believe it or not. We've already thinned the herd with these opening minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes in, everybody's done.
Yeah, I mean, Stewie, you've been on a wild ride these last 2 years. I'll start with you. A lot has happened, good, bad, or indifferent, to lead you to where you're at today. I'm just going to softball that thing and let you take it from there.
Yeah, that's a good softball. Look, there's a story about my leaving the private practice of law and joining Osborne that we told some time back. For those of you who aren't in the Metroplex, I won't overtell like the Osborne story. This is not the time or the place to do that. But suffice to say, the Osborne chapter has ended because of the corporate nature of what went on and what transpired at Osborne. It is as I've had the opportunity to like talk with people about what happened at Osborne, and sort of share some of that, both in terms of like prospectively to help people avoid certain situations, and then in some instances just asking people for guidance and help and saying, hey, this is what's going on. What are your thoughts on this? The most common refrain was, you're living through a business case study. You're living through something that people who have an MBA, study for an entire semester, because it has all the trappings of something that challenge business leaders and send them through like really, really complicated phases of their business. But that, again, today is not the day for that. I think there will be a day for that. I think as we package it and think through it and tell it and have folks on maybe to tell, there's another time and another place. But effective at the end of the year, that is to say 12/31/23, my employment there ended by my choice to go begin what is the next chapter for Stewart. And it was just an actual firefight. Every day was a firefight. And it still is, because in this next chapter, I'm still doing some of the work for and with Osborne as they wind things down. And we're on to the next chapter. And we can talk through, how that chapter got put together and whatnot. But the short version of the story is Tim started a firm a few months back. We'll tell that story. And effective 1/1/24, I've jumped in with Tim to open our Dallas office of the law firm. And so we're off and running. That's what that next chapter entails for us. And we can talk through that and what we're doing and who's involved and why we're doing it and all the things we're excited about and all that stuff too. But again, just to kind of put a pin on it, as the Osborne chapter ends, a new super exciting chapter begins for a few people who are in the fold for the firm. So I don't know if that answers the question well enough. You may have questions, and Tim, you might want to refine some of that, but that's a short version.
My biggest question, maybe it's for now, maybe it's later, you can call this shot, is going back to the private practice. What was the thought process behind that to ultimately get there? Because I know you had a lot of mentors speaking into your life and trying to give you unfiltered advice. I guess we should say some straight line advice that maybe wasn't aimed in this direction. So there's got to be something special about this that breaks that mold to some extent to go back into private practice. Yeah,
I mean, I'll tell a short version of a story again, and we can unpack it or talk about it some other day. But for someone like me, right, I've been practicing construction law now about to complete my 20th year of practice. There's a couple of different options that you're presented with when you have this like inflection point. I could go find another job like the Osborne job, or I could go back to a firm, or I could pivot out of the practice law completely. I could go do something completely different with my set of skills that I've derived over time, or a new set of skills that I wanted to pick up. That's sort of the 3-pronged option tree. And the latter really wasn't on the table in terms of decision making. It wasn't something that was comfortable with me. That is to say, pivot into something completely new. I've been doing this for a long time, and I think the skill set that I have and that I've derived over time is valuable to the industry, right? So the option tree really got narrowed to 2: go find another job like this, or go back to a firm. And neither one of those options really worked, right? And Tim and I talked about this extensively. This was before the decision to join the firm, right? Which is, what does this look like? I would say going back to the private practice of law in a traditional sense, or that is to say, in like going to another firm, wasn't something that I wanted to do. There's a bunch of reasons why. I mean, you learn lessons along the way about things you like, things you don't like, places you want to be, places you don't want to be, people you want to work with, people you don't want to work with. And so just going back and jumping in at another firm, and I use that term generically, like just another run-of-the-mill firm, I'm out on that. And then the idea of finding another job like the Osborne job, well, that doesn't exist. And if you go back and rewind to the episode where we talked about me leaving the firm to go to Osborne, that was the only job that I was leaving private practice for. And when Daniel and I sat down and we talked through what that looked like, it was a job that spoke specifically to my skill set, specifically to my gifting, specifically to like the things that I wanted to be working on. And when you look at the marketplace for opportunity in that space, those jobs don't exist. Like the job at Osborne was unique because it allowed me to specifically lay into the things that I wanted to be doing. And that's when Tim and I got started talking. He's like, you can get the best of the firm, like what you loved at the firm and what you loved at Osborne, and we can put it together in this space. And it'll be something that we can both be very excited about as we blend those things that you're really good at, you're gifted at, you love doing, you have some expertise in. We can do it right here. And so that's sort of an intermediate version to get to how this decision got made. But I think that's probably a helpful launching point to some other things.
Yeah, I mean, the key word that sticks out to me, and I'm going to kick this to you now, Tim, from all the notes and the prep and the discussions that we've had prior to this episode, is the word known to me. You know, like I'm still in startup 6 months in on this business, and knowing the people I'm starting the business with and not hiring from scratch is a really big deal, because there's a level of trust, there's a level of camaraderie. You've figured out the strengths and weaknesses. There's so many benefits that just make the journey a lot more fun. So that word really does stick out to me, because obviously y'all are tight, you know, despite Tim not wanting to acknowledge that. Y'all are boys. And Tim, you took this leap of faith to start Rothberg, and now it's being added to with your friends. And just talk about that journey of taking that leap of faith, I think solo at first, and then finding out through the days, months, weeks, whatever it was, that you might have some partners and some known horsepower to add to the table.
Yeah, no, it's been quite a ride. You know, the firm is now Rothberg Shurtleff Dang PLLC. And I had done the solo route once before, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And there, you know, Kevin, you're going through it now. There's a whole series of freedoms that bring great joy, but there's also lots of stresses when the buck stops with you, literally on all facets of the business. And so having gone through that before, I had a little bit of advanced kind of warning of what to expect. And so, and maybe this is a story for another day as well, what caused me to leave a national construction firm to start a local boutique. But I was pretty excited to do it. When I didn't start alone this time. Ashley Shurtleff, she's only made one bad decision in her life. That's Kevin Stewart. But she came along to start this thing with me in April. So did Crystal Dang, and then Tony Ali. Both of them were at Picard and Abramson with us and left. And so we started 4 strong in April. And that just made it easier to have a sounding board to talk to with everyone. And you guys have been around this space long enough to know that regardless of the size of a company, the number one way you can kill culture, especially when you're trying to build it, is bringing wrong people in immediately. And so, to use your word, Kevin, known, to be able to start at a position with 3 other people that I know the quality of human being they are, not just the quality of the legal work they do, but their sense of worldview, their value set, their treatment of each other. And then you add somebody like Stewart for all of his many warts, and there are a lot. We don't have enough time, recording space to cover all this. to have the opportunity to add somebody like him that is a culture adder, that he's just really, really good at this, at the people piece of the business. Absolutely a no-brainer. And that's not even to talk about, just objectively speaking, the legal acumen and credentials that he brings to the table. I mean, if even if he was an unknown personality, this is a no-brainer from a business standpoint to bring in somebody that's been doing this for 20 years, that's board certified in construction law, that has worked through every type of construction business related dispute you can think through, from owners to general contractors to subcontractors and suppliers, all the way up the chain. And now coming in with the perspective of having lived through challenging days, I just think that's going to bear a lot of fruit for the industry that Stewart is now able to help again.
Yeah, there's so many great points in that, and tying back to what Stewart was talking about with the different silos that we build in our lives. You know, and I one of our former guests, Jeff Wittenberg, when I was in exploration mode, he broke this down really well, and just talking about, like, okay, you got your leadership, which is tremendous, right? Like, that silo is awesome. Your network, super powerful. Your widget's your third silo. So if you ditch that, you're effectively only coming with 2/3 of the person you are. If you decide to move out of state, and not do glazing, you're 1/3 of the person. And so, like, if I'm evaluating you as somebody that doesn't know that person on a resume, that's going to be tough sledding. And so, to your point, Tim, you got the widget, right? Construction law. Stewie's been doing it for 20 plus years and doing it effectively. Leadership. We've been doing this podcast. We better have learned a few things about leadership and have applied it by now. If not, man, nobody should be listening. And then powerful network. And I know, Stewart, I mean, hopefully I'm not sharing too much dirty laundry, but there were some concerns about, like, man, like leaving that silo and feeling like you were going to leave it. But I'm pretty certain you're seeing now that you never left it, you know, and they were never gone. You know, it looked different.
Yeah. And I think part of the conversations that I've had with clients over the last, I guess 45 days or so now, they've been really encouraging, because for 2 reasons. One, I realized that, well, I think I knew it at the time, but I really realized that I always did business and represented my friends. And sometimes they started as my friends and became clients, and sometimes they were clients and became my friends. But they never were. It was always connected like that. And so when I left the private practice of law, I didn't stop hanging out with my friends. I still went and got lunch with people. They weren't my clients anymore. I still went and got lunch with them. My calendar was still kind of packed around breakfasts and lunches and stuff like that. Just checking in, catching up, still doing what we had always been doing, sharing stories, offering advice, hearing how things are. And so as I've been having some of the same meetings recurring here, and I tell them, hey, here's what's going on. I commonly get are you taking clients back? Yes, man. Yes. And a couple of times even the idea of, like, great. Like, we're really thankful to have you back on the team. And those are moments where you're just like, I kind of got chilly bumps saying it. And I know your team will make fun of me for saying that, but it's those moments of, like, yeah, I not too do of my own horn, but just like, I really miss that. I really miss some of that. You know what I mean? Why are y'all shaking your head? I'm trying to be serious, and now y'all are making fun of me. Nobody can see it.
Well, you said tootly or whatever, your own horn, and you don't get to be serious when you're making up words.
Well, that's a fair point. But in any event, it's been really encouraging the last 45 days as we started bringing clients back into the fold and have those conversations. So point all well made from you, Kevin.
Well, and I'll get another serious thing in here for Tim. On your LinkedIn page, it says, we bring expertise to the table and leave the egos behind. So that was when it was just R. Now that it's RS, do you have to ditch that slogan? Because
Yeah, we'll have to come with a whole new slogan. Now that Stewart's on board, there's no way to ditch that ego.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know.
Tim is just welcome as a permanent host now to the podcast. His eye twitch to the words you were saying made me laugh in itself. I know this isn't a video podcast, but this is gonna be fun.
Yeah, no, it's just like I said, Tim and I've been making fun of each other for almost 25 years. It's just nothing that can be said without someone getting ragged on about it. It's just how it goes, man.
Well, it makes for a fun journey, especially in startup mode. And I mean, that season's going to be short lived with the expertise, network, and your leadership in the industry. So it's going to be a fun to watch. But what is the firm specifically like looking at the widget silo? What are you specifically looking at? Who are you partnering with? What does the beginning look like from a widget standpoint?
I mean, the widget is what the widget has always been for me. For me, it's construction law. I mean, that's evolved as to specifically how I would articulate that over time. I mean, when I was a baby lawyer, it was all litigation stuff, and then sort of in the intermediate space, it was a morphed nature of litigation and handling big things, but also like popping in on your executive meetings and catching phone calls in the car with a difficult thing. And in the middle sort of interstitial period, I would say think of me as being next door to you, not an awkward conflict checked away. And so I would get the random, hey, I'm got a call from the landlord today. This is what they were talking about. Can you help me with that? Yeah. Here, think about this. Assess that. Pull your lease. Look at this. If you got any questions, call me back. And it became 50% high stakes litigation and 50% just outside general counsel, right? And I mean, part of the season was doing high stakes litigation, right? We told some of those stories, and there's a season where I was just bogged down in some of that. But to kind of get back to the base question is, it's representing people in the built environment. It's people who build things. When people catch me on the sideline of a game, they're like, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, "I represent people who build things." And sometimes that's general contractors, and sometimes it's subcontractors. You would think, "Oh, that creates a lot of conflict." Well, but it doesn't really, because in that space, I represent my friends, and I help people who have problems, and I help add value to those situations. And the thing that I can do, and kind of what how Tim and I, became friends, where we were co-captain the mock trial team, and was it 2001? I guess 2001. Was trying, like at the time, fake, but trying cases together. And that's Tim's expertise, man. Tim's expertise is like high stakes litigation. You had to bet the farm on something, call Tim. And I've said that for years. I've said that when we didn't work together. I said that when we worked together at P&A. I've said that out loud in every room possible. I mean, there's only one person I know who has $100 million jury verdict on their resume and is an ABOTA guy and board certified in trial law, civil trial law, and construction law. There's two of those people in the whole state of Texas. There's only one that has the ABOTA add-on. Tim's the best there is. And so when you get the opportunity to like join up with somebody and bring like my problem solving general counsel, act like I'm next door, and buckle that in with, you want to bet the farm, you're going to use Tim. It's kind of a win-win proposition, even though it is a boutique law firm. There's only 5 of us, but you're not going to find that sort of horsepower somewhere else. And I hate to say, like, that sounds like I'm tooting my own horn. I won't make the noise, but I absolutely am tooting that horn. You're not going to find it anywhere else.
And I will vouch, Tim, he has said that about you for years.
Yeah.
It's about time he says something that's both truthful and nice.
Yeah. The combo.
Yeah, it is the combo.
Well, to piggyback on that, I don't want to lose the other ones in the shuffle. Crystal Dang comes from a first-year trial and employment background. She just became board certified in construction. She's been really, really involved in the construction industry. She was an ENR 40 under 40. Tony Ali brings a wonderful perspective to things, as he comes from a family of entrepreneurs. And so you're talking about somebody who absolutely understands from the beginning the importance of stewarding the opportunity of somebody's livelihood and business well, because he's lived it. That's a really neat perspective. And then Ashley's the smartest out of all of us, coming from a high pedigree transaction background at Haynes and Boone to have that sort of horsepower to unleash on contract review and analysis is, you're just not going to find a more powerful boutique with the footprint I think we're going to be capable of doing in a very cost-effective, nimble, and creative way. So I'm pretty excited to see how this unfolds. And no disrespect to the legal market in Texas, but I think the construction legal market is ready for some disruption, and we hope to be the mechanism for that.
Yeah, and you have quite the startup squad. That's where I was going to go next, was trying to figure out who's who in that startup squad. And you got Houston and Dallas covered, now pretty much the state of Texas. That's not typical in startup mode to already be launched in 2 cities.
Yeah.
But when you have that sort of firepower paired with not a tremendous amount of overhead, it allows you to be a little bit more nimble and adaptive and play to the strengths of the team that you have. And so it's going to be exciting to see.
Yeah, let me double down on something Tim said, because in as much as you sort of said, yeah, Stewart's been saying that about Tim for a long time. Another thing I've been saying about Ashley for a long time is she's the smartest person in any room she's ever been in. I mean, she graduated #1 in our law school class. Ashley and I were moot court partners, mock trial partners, practice court. Like we went through law school together, and we've sort of worked in this capacity. And for a while, then she graduated #1, went and did big law stuff, like crazy, complicated. She has really awesome and yet also terrible, like big law corporate stories. And so there's been a couple of instances where I've been like, hey, can you help look at this or something like that? And she's like, yeah, I can look at that for you. And I turn around and she's like, okay, here's the answers. I'm like, huh? And I've worked with some great attorneys, but her ability to like quickly pick up and process what we're doing is, it sounds like I'm being cheeky because she's my wife, but it is unparalleled, man. And we've had some corporate referrals so far as like, hey, can you help put together this deal where and I'm like, she's like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. It's just like, boom. And it's so you have a real squad, a real startup squad that's going to be difficult. It's going to be really difficult to find a group of lawyers that can match that in our space with our nimble nature. So we kind of said a few of the same things over again, but I just want to double back on a couple of those ideas.
Well, you have actual data on the whole married up thing. We just use it as a cliche, but you literally married up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
yeah.
There's proof in statistics that show that you did. So congratulations.
Yes, absolutely did. We've known that for a long time.
Yeah, I think this is just an absolute textbook case of blackmail. Stewart's got something on Ashley. That is the only way this makes sense.
Yeah. We'll never know. We'll never know.
I got nothing to say about that.
No, you don't. It's fun to listen to this and digest it and reflect on it as we're talking. And there's a lot of parallels with the journey here, where you have this startup squad and you're starting relatively small, right? And you're going to work into something over time. You're working on big cases and stuff, but number of people and volume probably is down. And you have a staff that has the home run capability, right? But you're starting, using baseball analogies, you're starting in like the singles and doubles, but you have a crystal ball all the way up through home runs and grand slams. What's going to happen? Yeah. And that crystal ball of time and wisdom and leadership and all those things that we're talking about is really value added for your clients to say, hey, I've seen this play out before. Have you thought about X, Y, and Z? And man, you can read I think we talked about this last week, Stewie. You could read every book in the world and study stuff, but if you haven't lived certain things, it's really hard to crystal ball the what ifs, and so since y'all have seen this from different angles, from large firms, large cases, diverse clients, it's going to be hard to surprise y'all with something that pops.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you a good example. We were on a call 2 weeks ago with a client who has an issue that's going on with, I won't belabor it, has an issue going on. It was me and Tim and Ashley on the phone, like brainstorming about the issue, brainstorming with the client about different ways to solve it. And Ashley has ideas I had not had derivative of the document. She's like, what about this? And then what about this? And Tim is flipping switches around like some options that we would have from a litigation perspective. What if we did this? What if we made this demand? We could make this happen. We could do this. And having been behind the curtain, so to speak, I'm like, well, have you contemplated the business what is your bank going to think about this if you do it like, and all those ideas come triangulating together in a way that just provided that client with really good options and really good clarity on how those options would play out. And it never has been my place to call the shot, but we hang up the phone and you're like, well, there's a lot of information and a lot of ability to make a really good informed decision on that issue from an hour, 45 minutes of a call with us. And so anyway, I just want to, again, I'm doing a touch of doubling down, but that's a specific instance where those 3 pieces of experience all come together to provide just an immense amount of value in a really high stakes situation for a client just in the last couple of weeks.
And what y'all have that even an equally talented firm might not have is that hustle, the eagerness of and excitement of the early phases. And I think a lot of people recognize that with startup companies, knowing that, man, they're going to be all in on this thing. This is more precious to them than just another client, just another job. So y'all have that feather in your cap as well.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll speak for myself, but I think all of us have always felt that, right? Because there's been a particular amount of hustle that I've always run around with. It's probably a character flaw at some point. We can unpack that, but like it's always been hustle because I think it's a little bit of being addicted to helping folks. I know that's like, what's your worst personality trait? Well, I work too hard. Like that's kind of the way that sounds, but like I love helping folks, man. And so finding the hustle, finding the problems, finding I've always loved doing it. So yes, it is startup hustle, but it's also just part and parcel to who we are too, which kind of comes back to everybody being a known quantity and having a high level of trust around all of it.
Well, Kevin, you'll get this. I mean, I think one of the things that I've always really respected about the people in the construction space is your character and reliability matters, because at the end of the day, whether it's a freeway or a building or whatever, like it's going to stand the testament of time, whether or not you built something that you want your name on, period. And so, to be around folks that care as much about what they do as we do is really helpful. We're never going to build a building. There's never going to be a plaque that says that's Stewart Shurtleff or Tim Rothberg. But just like caring about how the building looks, we care very, very much about our reputation. Are we providing the quality service that we would expect if we were in that position? And so that drives a hustle. And Kevin, I know you feel that because you're in that space right now. Is your every decision and work you do is developing your reputation for the rest of the time. And that matters.
It does matter. And that's something that I think takes time to learn. Again, that's a life experience thing. Our team was actually just talking about that at lunch today, the day we were recording, about you can't treat things in a silo, like this isolated thing. We can't run it to the ground without seeing the big picture, because we might win this battle, but man, we might lose a war. And that war might be the next 10 jobs that we'll never hear of because we fought for this one change order and really thought we stuck it to them. That's not how Texas rolls. This is relationship and reputation, R&R. But those two, you got to have relationships, number one, but then once the door's cracked open for you, do you perform? Do you execute? Are you there for them? Are you willing to see their side of the story and expand perspective, or are you only after your agenda? So those are critically important. Based on just my pure curiosity, because of the parallels that we're running together, do y'all get together and talk about, we have this crystal ball, but how do we make it better? Like, we used to do it this way and that worked pretty good. How do we 2.0 it? Are y'all having conversations around?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's part of the excitement.
Yeah.
And we've all have worked in different laboratories, and we've seen some things that have worked well, and frankly, we learn a lot more by seeing things that work not well at all. We've been in places where you've heard people use buzz phrases that are very popular out there about we're a team, people first, collaboration. But you also have seen that that's just, lip service. It's not real. So it's really an opportunity for us to put our money where our mouth is. If we say we stand for X, how do we write policies, values, standard operating procedures that all incentivize, reflect, and encourage progress toward that value set? And so that's been a lot of fun to actually see what do we believe and how do we live that.
That sounds like a couple of episodes of the podcast too, right? And that's not unique to me having that perspective. I mean, that's unique to all five of us saying, like, where are we going and how are we going to get there? And what do our experiences bring with us to make sure that we avoid that ditch or get squarely into that spot that we appreciated from before? Because I like the way you said that, Tim. We've all worked in different laboratories to be able to make sure we're mixing this up just right.
So much good stuff in there. I have to ask one final serious question, and kind of relates to the Super Bowl with all those super cheesy lawyer commercials. Do y'all plan on doing something cartoonish that I could catch on the evening news? Is that in RSD's future? What does that look like?
No, I think our commercials will probably air during soap operas in the middle of the day, probably on the CW. That's probably where they're going. They have to work, though. I mean, I don't know the answer to your question. They have to work, though, because there's so many of them. There's so many of them. But Ashley and I have a funny story because there's a guy who does some of those zany commercials that are on in the middle of daytime television on a one-off network with the Lion, Ryan the Lion Thompson. Have you seen these commercials?
I don't think I have.
They're not in your market, Tim, but now that I've said it, you'll see one. There's billboards all around town. Homeboy used to have the side of all the Dallas Metro. There's billboards with his face on there. He was in our study group in law school. Ryan and I hung out together all in law school. He's still a friend. I text him every once in a while the question stuff. He does them. And I've asked him about how much money he's spending in the context of it and what the return. It's very high return. So if you're in the personal injury space, which we're not, if you're in the personal injury space, that is a very high value marketing piece because people call. You got a catchy call Ben or whatever whatever it is, they call. And Ryan's bit is he's walking down the middle of downtown Dallas with a CGI lion walking with him, and
Dang.
It works. People call.
Yeah.
They look at that and they're like, "Oh, he must know," and they call him. And I don't know. That's not our target market, though. I don't think we're going to have cheesy. Tim, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's not cut off the opportunity before we actually, soundboard it.
Okay.
But can we do a CGI Sea Otter or something?
A sea otter. Yeah, we're going to workshop this. You want to just workshop it now, or maybe offline?
Maybe offline. I don't want people to take our good ideas.
Yeah, right. So maybe we get a CGI sea otter and we're in. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm out of serious questions. Did we leave out anything before we get to how the heck do people get a hold of y'all?
Yeah, let me. Tim might have some other stuff too, but let me give just two brief points. There's a term that's been rattling around in my brain, or a word I'll say is velocity, and I don't know if I stole it from somebody or as my own. The terms of how you apply it here, but we've had a lot of outside counsel helping us with stuff, and you get on the phone with them and start to have a conversation, and it doesn't they just don't understand what's going on. And you're like, what in the world, man? Because they don't understand what's actually going on inside the walls of our business and how the help I need. Right. And I think that the experience that I've had gives me a better ability to pick up speed with you. It gives me a better opportunity to reach velocity with you than it did maybe even before I had this Osborne experience. And so when the phone rings, you're already running, man. You've been running on that issue for weeks, probably before the phone rang for me. But I now have a different vantage point, and I can get up to speed with you real fast. And so that term of velocity, being able to be lockstep along with a client very quickly, it's an idea that I've been kicking around my mind. I think there's some truth to it. And Ashley, I had asked her, I was like, hey, we're going to do our RSD rollout episode. Help me brainstorm some of the things. And one of the things she said, I want to say here because I think it was really impactful, is the idea that I would not have written this story like this. As most people say, this is not the story I would have written. But even in the midst of it, I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know what we were going to do with it. And now with the benefit of hindsight, I can legitimately see that the path, the journey that we went on there, it really does make me uniquely qualified to come alongside folks and help them avoid problems, see problems they didn't know exist, and give me like a renewed perspective on my ability to help from outside the walls. And so as much as I didn't probably want it and I wouldn't have signed up for it, I definitely have a unique story that I think it's probably fair to say nobody else has. And I'm looking forward to like using that story to leverage the way we can help clients going forward. So hope that doesn't sound too salesy, because it's 100%, like I 100% feel that way, but I hope it doesn't sound salesy.
But now say it back, but with the CGI sea otter.
If for listeners, hit rewind, listen to that last 15 seconds or so, pretending like there was a CGI sea otter. See how that felt? See how that feels?
Yeah. I think we're on to it.
That's good advice.
I think
it's Kevin, for people who want to get a hold of us, it's Sea Otter Law.
SeaOtterLaw.com.
perfect.
No, you can go to Rothberg.law, and all of our contact information and things are on there. And at some point, Stewart will get a goofy mugshot on there as well.
I think they call it a headshot. It sounds more professional.
Oh,
when you
okay.
say it like that.
Same difference.
Yeah. Well, that's it, man. That's the story.
Excited for you guys, proud of you guys, and you're going to achieve great things. You're going to use that velocity to tremendously impact the industry and impact your family's lives and the people within your law industry. And you've lived that cycle of mountains being moved, and going to be thankful for them someday.
Yes,
and that someday, I think, is going to be soon.